The Project Megapack A330 has returned with a whole new 3D model, a new flight deck, some new custom sounds, a new flight model, and a fair amount of problems. Let's jump inside, go for a flight and take a look. We'll start by setting up our flight as we do in any Airbus. Because we're starting from the runway, the flaps are already set. We'll switch the terrain on the navigation display, set the nav range a little bit further out, get the local altimeter set by pressing B, head down to the FMC and see what's been pre-populated. So everything on the initialization page is pre-populated, the perf page also pre-populated. We'll just feed in flaps 1, but it doesn't really make a difference in this. And heading over to the flight plan page, it's pulled through the flight that we planned in the world map before we started. So far it's looking fairly good, fairly default. We'll set our desired cruising altitude. The sim recommends 41,000 feet, so that's what we'll enter here. And we'll also place it in managed climb mode. Although I'd expect it's just default climb and not actual VNAV. So this airplane has no way to configure your Thrustmaster Airbus throttle if you have one, so you have to use the throttle that's on the stick itself. This makes it fairly fiddly to set the flex position. Because the throttle on the stick has such a short travel, it's very sensitive, and the software detent for flex and climb is very small indeed. So we rotate at our rotate speed, and weirdly, as soon as we take off and put the gear up, the throttle falls into the manual position. The physical throttle hasn't moved, this is purely a software change. We activate the autopilot and the airplane starts to climb and follow our plan. There is a top of climb marked on the ND, so we'll see how the aircraft behaves when we reach it and if it has a top of descent marker too. As we climb out, we'll check a few things. So our destination ILS has been pre-tuned from our world map plan. And we're also able to successfully program our approach ref page. So we grab the weather for our destination and fill in this page. Although I don't really think it changes anything in this plane, as it recommends we approach at 280 knots. Looking at the ECAM, this seems to be fairly basic default functionality. I think only the fuel and the engine pages are currently working, so it seems this plane uses a lot of the default Airbus 320 systems, which, as we'll find out, don't play nicely with the new flight model. To the plane's credit, it does correctly stay below 250, below 10,000 feet, and then accelerate after that. But even with a fairly light fuel load, it does struggle to climb when it reaches about 30,000 feet. It's pretty clear we're never going to reach our recommended altitude of 41,000, so we dial in a new cruise altitude of 30,000 feet. We also update the FMC to reflect this, and when the plane reaches 30,000, the altitude cruise annunciator is correctly displayed. However, this is when things start to get a little bit weird. As soon as the plane reaches its cruising altitude, it starts to decelerate for some reason, although the throttle is still in the climb detent. And on that note, another issue is that the climb detent on the throttle in the flight deck doesn't seem to line up with the climb detent on the software. So the computer thinks we're in climb, but the throttle is actually further back from that. If we move the throttles to climb, the software then thinks the throttles are in a manual position. So that's two bizarre issues that don't seem to be related, but they certainly don't make this easy to fly. Let's look ahead a little bit on the ND, and we do have a top of descent marked here. Let's see how it behaves when we reach it. In preparation for top of descent, we'll grab our final descent altitude, which is 2,000 above ground level. The airport's at about 80 feet, so we'll dial in 2,000 in preparation for descent here. So at top of descent, the aircraft does actually idle these throttles, which means it's time for us to activate managed descent mode. The plane decelerates to its desired descent speed and then starts to descend. The aircraft enters a fairly stable descent of about 1,500 feet per minute.
Please expedite your climb, flying level 310.
During descent, as soon as we reach the deceleration waypoint, the plane actually starts to nosedive and ends up overspeed. So we have to quickly manually pitch the nose up and idle the throttle to try and correct this condition. We do eventually get the plane stable again, but we're obviously way above our descent path and still going much faster than we should be at this point. To try and get us back on track, we'll get into selected speed mode and manually dial in our approach speed. This is actually about 126 knots, not the 280 that the plane recommended. We'll also drop the gear and the flaps as well, just to try and get the plane slowed down a little bit faster. Obviously we'll keep the flaps within limits so we don't end up going over speed again. Activating the landing system display, you can see there's no way in heck we're going to make this glide slope either. So to correct this, we'll enter selected heading mode and we'll vector ourselves away from the airport just while we descend, and once we're below the glide slope we can head back towards the airport for our approach. Once we're at a good height and heading back towards the airport, we'll activate approach mode and the aircraft intercepts the localizer pretty much immediately. And as we line up with the glide slope, the plane correctly begins its descent. We don't have an autopilot 2 mode on this plane, so we'll leave it in autopilot 1 and see what happens. My intention was to let the autopilot fly the airplane down until minimums, but it looks like we're fairly left of the runway here, so I put the plane into manual mode and bring it down myself. We touch down successfully, activate the reversers as soon as we're down, and bring the airplane to a stop. Please let me know your thoughts and experiences with this airplane in the comments below. I can't recommend it right now. What I would recommend is the Headwind A330, which is also featured on my channel. If you found this entertaining, informative or useful, please do drop a like and subscribe. Take care and I'll see you next time.